Hi, I'm Dominic, you're watching Dominic's Woodworks, and this is the third video in the Rauhnacht-Series. Check out the introduction up in the corner. And now, welcome to the end of the year, at least according to one calendar. Which also means welcome to a new year, a blank slate. Pretty scary, right? 12 months bursting with days full of hours filled with opportunities, where anything could happen. So it should not come as a surprise that people try to gain some insight into this uncertain future, and when better to do that than during those nights where the veil is at its thinnest, when the supernatural is within arm's reach so you can seize it by the neck and ask it your questions, if you dare. While the future could be gleaned on any kind of subject, there are two fields of prophecy that were especially important to the people back then. The first one has to do with keeping the family and, by extension, the family business running, getting your daughters married. Yes, it was usually about the daughters, because apparently the sons were expected to take care of themselves. Well, not entirely, but most of the methods I found aim at young women finding their husband-to-be in some obscure way or another. Which method you chose probably depended on how desperate you were, or your parents, I assume. The most demanding way to catch a glimpse of your intended was to go to a crossroads around midnight on a Rauhnacht. There you would be able to see him walk past you, but you were forbidden from talking to him or even looking at him after he passed you. Which is probably for the better, because who would want to know what their significant other is doing out so late in one of the coldest nights of the year, not to mention with all that evil roaming the land. Another way for a girl to divine her future husband is to slice an onion in half on the 24th. She then has to salt one half and leave it alone until the next day. It will then show her the face of her fate intended. I imagine, "I recognize you from my onion," would have been a common pickup line if pickup lines had been a thing back then. A more vague method was to stack wood after the bell had tolled for evening prayer. The next day, you were to count the pieces, and if you got an even number, your daughter would get married that year. So if your parents were able to count, you had a much better chance of finding someone, or so it would seem. The other topic of common prophecy is, you might have guessed it if you have seen the introduction video, the weather. That, of course, makes sense if you consider that for people working the land it is important to know how the weather will be, so they can plan accordingly. When to sow, when to harvest, and everything in between. I already introduced you to one such oracle, according to which the weather on the 12 days between the 26th and the 6th would correspond to the weather of the 12 coming month. You could divide it further, with the morning representing the first half of the month and the afternoon the second. The same pattern was also applied to dreams. Things dreamed of during the first half of the night on one of those days would come true during the first half of that month, and so on. I found it interesting to realize that that meant before and after midnight. I for one go to bed later than they used to back then, so I imagine, statistically speaking, my first halves of every month will be pretty boring for me. Back to the weather, and to onions. Another weather oracle can be made by cutting another onion in half. And what gave onions those special powers, I have no idea. You cut it in half and separate 12 layers. You place them on a board, mark them according to month, and then you salt them. The next day, A soggy slice promises a rainy month, whereas a dry slice is a good sign for an equally dry month. Whether you could reuse an onion to tell the weather after it already showed you your intended's face, I don't know. Maybe, if your husband looks like a thunderhead. There are also more obscure ways to divine the future. Some are pretty diffuse, like lead pouring, or, and I had no idea that there was a special word for this, molybdomancy. What it means is that you melt lead on a spoon over a candle and pour it into a bowl of cold water. Then you can, in theory, divine the future from the shape it ends up with. The same probably works with wax. One account stated that you should break an egg and pour it into a cup, and then you would be able to see signs of important events in the yolk. The problem with all those methods is that they are open to interpretation. They actually rely on it. So you might see what you want to see, or only see what you should have seen after the fact. In effect, you would be making your own fortune using these methods. There's another obscure belief that touches on fortune telling, and it works without interpretation. That is, if it works at all. During some of the Rauhnächte, the animals kept on the farm reportedly gained the ability to speak in a way humans can understand. On the one hand, they would use this ability to complain about their owner to the resident house ghost, who would then take it upon himself to punish the master of the house for any mistreatment of his animals. On the other hand, they are said to be able to know the future, so hiding under the trough and listening to them talk is probably a good idea if you want to know what the next year brings. You could go even further, for they also know the name of the next person in the family to die. The only problem is that according to most accounts, they would actually give the name of the person asking them. I have tried listening to them myself, and only got flack from my cats for not feeding them enough and an incoherent mumble from my bees. Given how important the future is to all of us, and that it was even more so back in the day a few centuries ago, it should come as no surprise that there are many more rituals and oracles that people turn to, and the ones that I have mentioned are only the tip of the proverbial iceberg. As another example, you could take your wheelbarrow out at midnight during a Rauhnacht and push it around the house 3 times. It will get heavier and heavier, until after the 3rd round, the devil himself would sit in it and might grant you a wish. Or pneumonia for being out in the cold doing pointless chores and becoming the laughingstock of your neighbors for believing the story they told you. Let's go back to the warm shop and examine that flute. Let me first tell you that this does not adhere to any conventional style of musical instrument making, and it sure sounds the part. For the wood, I want to give a shout out to Mark from Ireland for sending it to me. It's genuine eerie, from Ire, so even if it does not look outlandish, at least it's Irelandish. But enough with the puns. Given where it comes from, it has to be supercharged with runic energy, and with all the seriousness that you've come to expect from me, I'll use it to summon a spirit who will in all likelihood be able to foretell my future. Or maybe not. Let's give it a try. Yeah, it's a fake. I couldn't get it to work for the life of me, and yes, I know that it's pretty easy to make a flute or whistle, and I have made several attempts, but I couldn't get a sound to come out, and if I had, I would have taken that piece, miniaturized it, that is, chipped away at it again and again, and tried to put it in here, because what I started here didn't really work out either. And I'm still hoping to get that done someday, but there's also the thing about this not being completely flat, because, well, it's not a straight cut, there are curves in it, and so with a bandsaw curve it doesn't really add up. And I don't want to glue it shut before I can actually produce a sound. So, well, let me just cheat a little here. Yes, it's one of those videos. It worked!
Hey?
What will my future be like? Well, do you want me to sugarcoat it for you? Well, yeah, I guess. Okay then. You will make a cool new acquaintance from an unexpected place who will benefit greatly from your presence and become really close to you and your loved ones while you get the chance to explore new states of being and enlightenment. That sounds nice. And what would it sound like without sugarcoating? Well, seeing how you had no clue when you actually summoned me, and to start with, when you made that flute, I am a soul-eating, shape-shifting hellspawn, and I will eat your soul, replace you completely, and take over your life. Wait, so you will replace me and nobody will ever know?
Yes.
Except you will likely have other things to worry about, drifting through the void and possibly being dead. I see. But if you replace me completely, my looks, my wits, my everything, yes, no one will ever know the difference. Then how do you know that I haven't already been replaced by something way more powerful than you? Back again. So, I hope you enjoyed this video, even though the project attached to it was, yes, quite frankly, a failure. I had high hopes for this, and if it worked out, it would have been great, but it didn't, and I hope you still found this entertaining. I intend to do follow-up videos for all the Rauhnacht videos that I did so far, and I'll probably do one for each and every one of them. And for the others, I intend to go into the making of the project. For this one, I hope to be able to actually make the project. If you have any questions about the Rauhnacht in general, or oracles in this case, leave them down in the comments below, and I'd also appreciate any kind of feedback that you could give me. Thank you for watching. If it's still applicable at the time you're watching this, have a happy new year, and I'll see you in the next episode when we talk about monsters. And as always, remember to be inspired. Another one of those. I think it's a budget thing that they all look like me.